Hi everybody, this is Emily again, and I'm glad you came back to hear more of my Ireland travels. And this time, we are going spring break edition, so let's get on with part 3. So spring break for us was about a week and a half. My parents, my Uncle Dave, and my Aunts Sue and Grace came to Ireland to spend some time with me during that break. My mom stayed with me during that entire time. And these are the places that we went to in the month of March. After my study abroad group had dispersed, but before my parents came over, I had some time to explore the other parts of Dublin. For example, right across the street from the hotel I was staying at was the American College Dublin, a constituent college of Irish American University. These photos were of the college's corner building, which is also the childhood home of Oscar Wilde. Speaking of Oscar Wilde, right next door was the Marion Square Park, which featured a statue of the writer in an eccentric pose. I had to pose along with him, and as a result, I took some time to explore the park. The park also featured the National Memorial to members of the Defense Forces who died serving the state. The monument itself depicts a military tent, and inside there are 4 bronze figures guarding an eternal flame seen in the middle photo. And here are some additional photos I took at Marion Square Park. Much like the day that we went to St. Stephen's Greens, it was a beautiful day to be not only outside, but to be walking through the park. Then my parents, my aunts, and my uncle arrived in Dublin, so we took some time to explore the city. And one of the first things that we came across was a street performer on Grafton Street. Here he's doing an old Harry Houdini trick where he's in a straitjacket chained up and he had to find a way to escape. Spoilers, he did. While we were also on Grafton Street, we came across the statue of Philip Lynott, the lead singer of Thin Lizzy. The Irish really love Thin Lizzy. Afterwards, we took a tour of Kilmainham Jail. I know it looks like it should say Gaol, but it's jail, trust me. It is a prison most famous for housing leaders of the Easter Rising of 1916, a rebellion launched to end British rule and establish the Irish Republic. Here are some photos of the names of the leaders whose cells were down below, like Patrick Pearse, the main leader of the rebellion who read off the proclamation of the Irish Republic at the General Post Office, which put the rebellion in motion, Joseph Plunkett, and Countess Markievicz. However, nearly a week of fighting, Pearse surrendered, and 4,340 men and 79 women were arrested, 187 tried, 90 were sentenced to death, and 14 were executed by firing squad at Kilmainham Jail. Now here are some more pictures of the jail itself. The top left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner photos were ones that I took. The one on the top right-hand corner is of the sky view of the building itself. I didn't take that one, and I didn't take the one in the bottom left-hand corner, which is of the spot that most of the Easter Rising leaders were executed at. Now, with all this talk of death and all that stuff, I wanted to bring some lights of hope. You see this crazy guy in the photo? His name is Eamon Dave Valera. He was one of the leaders in the Easter Rising, and like the others, he was sentenced to death. However, that never happened for him for a multitude of reasons, some of them being the growing public opposition to the executions themselves, as well as the fact that he was born in America. So, because of the fact that he was allowed to live, he actually went on to bigger and better things, like becoming the Taoiseach, or the Prime Minister of Ireland, during various periods from the 1930s to the 1950s, and eventually become the President of Ireland from 1959 to 1973. The other light of hope was that after the Rising, the survivors of the rebellion formed a political party that eventually gained enough votes that they actually made their own legislature and declared independence in January of 1919. And you can learn more about Eamon de Valera, the other leaders in the Easter Rising, and other important figures in Irish history in the book Irish History, an illustrated A to Z. It is currently being processed at the Clarkston Library right now, so it should be available on our shelves hopefully sometime soon. Then we went to the Guinness Storehouse, which is famous for brewing Guinness. And while we were there touring the museum, we actually had samples of various kinds of Guinness. And I realize now that I can only tolerate it in shots. But enough about that. So there was a gift shop in the factory in which, I kid you not, I bought a stress ball version of a mini pint Guinness. And it is so awesome. And I still have it to this very day. So after our time in Dublin, my parents and I took a train to Cork in County Cork. So here are some of the pictures of the streets of Cork, as well as pictures overlooking the River Lee. And overall, I had a pretty good time in Cork. It was pretty fabulous. And one of the first things that we did in Cork was visit the Blarney Castle, a medieval castle best known for the Blarney Stone. Now, I took this photo off the internet because when we went that day, it was kind of cloudy, but luckily it actually got a little brighter as the day went on, and it was still a pretty good trip to Blarney Castle. And on the left, here's a picture of my dad sitting at a bench that actually says Blarney Castle, although you can't see the rest of it there, but trust me, it says Blarney Castle. And on the picture on the right, it actually details the building itself and how each of the rooms were used and a little bit of its history. So the top left photos are ones that I took while I was on top of Blarney Castle. The top left photo is of the land near the castle, and the one on the top right corner is me looking down on the other floors of the castle. So getting to the top of the castle was really interesting. Not only did the castle itself have really small stairways, but it also had small and steep steps, meaning that you had to be very careful when climbing up the steps. And if you didn't, you would have fallen flat on your face. And there was a bit of a line to get to the stone itself, so you just had to be patient and careful at the same time. Now let's talk more about the Blarney Stone itself. It's really just a small slab of limestone. And to kiss it, you had to go through a very specific procedure. A staff member will tell you to lie flat on your back and then hold on to the bars seen in the bottom photos. And while a staff member is grabbing onto you, just to protect you, you tilt your head back and kiss the stone. And that is what me and my dad are doing in those particular photos. And I like to think that I developed a gift of the gab from there. Then our day trip from Cork was to a seaport named Cobh. The left photo is of a monument dedicated to the victims of the Lusitania sinking that occurred in 1915. The bottom right photo is me looking out at the waters from the port itself, and the top photo is of the Titanic Experience Museum, along with our paddy wagon. Our tour bus, of course. So Cobh is best known for its ties with the Titanic. Right before it set out on its voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, the last stop the Titanic made was in Cobh, which was known as Queenstown at that time. Now, there were some passengers who didn't have good feelings about being on the ship itself. And those feelings were so intense that they actually got off at Cobh. And quite frankly, they made the right choice on that. Well, let's talk about the museum itself. The Titanic Experience is what you would expect of a Titanic museum. It just has more of a local context because of Cobh. And it also had this really cool model replica of the Titanic, and I had to recreate that one scene from Titanic the movie. And the bottom photo is of me and my mom just goofing around at the museum. So here is St. Colman's Cathedral, that's also in Cove, and from the looks of it, it was a really tall cathedral. And surprisingly, my mom wanted to go up to the tower, which is 300 feet, and actually ring the bells. And believe me, she was tired when she got down. And the bottom photo is my dad standing at the entrance. I mean, look at how grand it is. It's unbelievable. And move over, Liverpool. I found the real Penny Lane. Then after Cork, we made our way to Killarney in County Kerry. So while we were in Killarney, we came across the Grand Pub. So while I was in Ireland, I went into a lot of pubs, but none of them were as stereotypically Irish as the Grand Pub. I mean, even the ties that you see in some of the backgrounds said, "Kiss me, I am Irish." I mean, you couldn't get more stereotypically Irish than that. But it still had like good live music, good atmosphere, good food, and so I'm not taking that away from them. I mean, we had a really good time, especially my dad, who, of course, as you see in the bottom photo, he has his pint of Guinness. In fact, he had 9 of them throughout the week that he was there. Good times. And while we were in Killarney, we actually went on the Ring of Kerry, which is essentially a scenic drive around the Iveragh and the Dingle Peninsulas. So these are some of the photos I took while we were on the Ring of Kerry, and sadly it was a little cloudy and it rained a lot, which I hate to admit it, but it dampened my view on that part of the trip. But you know what? The scenery was still beautiful, and maybe one of these days I'd like to go back. One of the places that we stopped along the Ring of Kerry was the Kerry Bog Village, a museum dedicated to showing how people lived and worked in 19th century Ireland. On the left is my dad making a goofy face while standing next to, I believe, a memorial of some sort. And the right photo is of a plaque talking about bog bodies. Fun! And here are some more pictures from the Kerry Bog Village, including what cottages would have looked like in 19th century Ireland. And of course, they had to have the Kerry Bog Pony. Oh, they're so cute. And while we were also on the Ring of Kerry, we stopped in Waterville for some lunch, and while we were there, we found a Charlie Chaplin statue. And apparently, he and his family used to spend holidays here once a year for over 10 years starting in 1959. The citizens loved him so much that they erected this statue. And I think it's pretty cool, and of course it's me and my dad posing along with that statue. Then after Killarney, we came to Limerick in County Limerick. Now, we only stayed essentially a night and a day in Limerick, but we managed to do a couple of things there. One of them was to visit King John's Castle and the museum inside. The castle was built on the orders of its namesake king in 1200 and remains one of the best preserved Norman castles in Europe. And here are a couple of the pictures that were inside the museum. The museum essentially talked about the history of the building, as well as the history that was surrounding that particular time period. And it also provided some really cool facts, especially the one in the blue bubble. Oh, the irony. But one of the best things about being at King John's Castle was actually being on top of the castle itself, where I took a lot of the pictures overlooking the castle as well as overlooking the River Shannon from the castle itself. And I can see how it is one of the most preserved Norman castle there is. I mean, it is very sturdy, and it's just a really nice view overall. And since my dad's name is John, he wanted me to take a picture of him right next to the King John's Castle sign, which I happily did for him. The museum also had a gift shop in which I bought a couple of souvenirs in which I will reveal at the end of this video. Afterwards, we came across the Treaty of Limerick, which is an actual stone that ended the Williamite War in Ireland in 1691. This war was between the Jacobites, people who supported the exiled English King James II, who was Catholic, and the Williamites, the supporters of the English King William III, who was known as Prince William of Orange, and his wife Mary, and also daughter of James II, who both were Protestants. So this was also part of the history of the conflicts between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland, and for more on those, you can check out my videos that I did for January and February. So after our time in Limerick, my dad actually flew back to the States, where then my mom and I actually made our way to Tully Cross. Well, we made some stops along the way, including Galway in County Galway. So I cheated a bit. My group and I actually went to Galway as part of a day trip back in February, and this is where that photo was taken with my college mate Jackie right next to some statues of Oscar Wilde and Estonian writer Edward Wilde, who lived right around the same time as Wilde. However, I thought that the statue was cool enough that I wanted to show my mom it. However, someone did this to Oscar Wilde! Who would do such a thing? But what do you have in mind? And while we were in Galway, my mom and I ate at the King's Head pub, which is one of the oldest buildings in Galway as it dates back to the 13th century. And if you're wondering, yes, the food was good. And after our time in Galway, we moved up to Clifton, still in County Galway. And again, I'm cheating a bit because I actually spent some time in Clifton because of my theater internship, but I wanted to show my mom a few places around. So on the left is the St. Joseph's Church. In the top right photo is of one of the streets in Clifton, and in the bottom right photo, it is my mom and I at the Clifton Station House bar where we had dinner at. And in the middle is the Thomas O'Whelan statue, which my mom and I encountered during the day. And while we were admiring it, we encountered a gentleman who introduced himself as Daniel Salmon. As we talked with him some more, we found out that he was the brother to one of the pub owners in Tully Cross, and that he took a walk from Renville, which is close to Tully Cross, to Dublin to celebrate and commemorate 1916 and the long struggle for Irish independence and freedom, which he all wrote in this very book here. And the Clarkston Library is actually processing it as we speak, so it should be on our shelves sometime very soon. So since this video covers my travels that I did in March of 2014, how could I not cover what I did on St. Patrick's Day in Ireland? Well, it all starts right now. So in Ireland, St. Patrick's Day is seen as a national holiday, as opposed to America, where we essentially see it as an excuse for drinking. So on that day, there were a lot of parades going around, like in Tully Cross here, where they're promoting the Connemara Mussel Festival, a festival in which my group would actually help out at the very end of our study abroad term. We also attended the St. Patrick's Day parade in Clifton because it was a little bit bigger of a parade than it was in Tully Cross, but it was still a lot of fun. And here are some more pictures from that particular parade. They really like The Wizard of Oz. I mean, it's a really good film. I don't blame them. And so here is at the end of the parade. So now I wanted to shift to the souvenirs that I was alluding to earlier in this video. One of them being this Irish flag. So the reason why the Irish flag is that way is that the green essentially represents the Catholics, and the orange, supporters of William of Orange, were the Protestants, and the white is essentially them coming together. And I still have this flag to this very day. And another thing that I bought were these leggings, because I could. Now, of course, I didn't wear them when I was at the pub on St. Patrick's Day. Because, it might be a little too weird. I know, right? But while we were at the pub, there were a lot of families that were there and a lot of live music and surprisingly very little drinking. But you know what? I still had a lot of fun. So stay tuned for the final episode where I talk about Connemara ponies, the Burren National Park, the Dungare Castle, Rock of Cashel, Cahir Castle, Cove/Kinsale, the Cliffs of Moher, Tully Mountain, Inishfabin, and Kylemore Abbey. See you next time. Bye!